How did you get involved in a veterinarian?
Well, having been born and raised on a purebred livestock farm, that livestock meant an awful lot to us, and with as many livestock as we had, why, there was frequent need for nursing and health care. It was an awful sad thing to lose an animal, and particularly the horses. I think the first time I experienced seeing tears in my dad's eyes was seeing 6 of our mares laying dead in the lot. The first graduate veterinarian to be registered in Nebraska was 1897, I think. 97, 98. Gee, that's only about 105 years ago. And I've practiced here 53. Half of that history.
Right.
And I got my degree in animal husbandry and then went into veterinary medicine. The biggest share of my practice in those years was what we call a fire call practice for sick animals. The main preventive medicine routines were in swine with the vaccinations for hog cholera and erysipelas. And of course, in cattle for brucellosis, which is an abortion disease, and then that became required, excuse me, particularly in dairy herds because of the cleanliness of the milk, purity, and the first disease that was government regulated and required, of course, was for tuberculosis. I was driving 40,000 miles a year. My territory, of course, was the county. The nearest practice when I started here to the southeast was Crete. You got a call and you took care of it. Any routine work of vaccinations, castrations, dehorning, and routine work, those you could set up ahead of time, and of course you'd try and lay out a route for the day to take care of them. But the sick animals, your sick calls came at your time, in the mornings or in the evenings. And of course, some of those evening calls couldn't wait until morning, so you did a lot of night work too. And so that's why we called it a fire call practice. I guess I was a slow learner. It took me until the early 60s, over 10 years, to decide that if I'm driving 40,000 miles a year, you can't possibly average 50 miles an hour. That's 800 hours that I'm sitting behind that wheel. Not putting butter on my bread, I'm spending money. And that many hours, how many 40-hour weeks is that? That's 100 days of the ordinary person's work time that works an 8-hour day. That's a third of a year. There's only 300 working days. You take off the Sundays and the holidays, there's 300 working days. This is dumb. A lot of these calls, of course, we have to go to. But there's an awful lot of that they can bring them to me. And I set up the pins up there and I said, bring them in. I had a hard time convincing folks at first, but I concreted out those pens and arranged them to work cattle. And once they brought them in without mud and manure up to their knees and a clean place to work, bring them in, work them, run back on the truck, take them home. About that time, most everybody had pickups or truck or livestock trailer, and by jinx, that just worked slick. As time went along, and some of those items were regulated then to what we call a client-patient relationship. They've all become much more knowledgeable, and the livestock being concentrated into larger units, they have to be more knowledgeable, and we have made them more knowledgeable, and we work with them.